Welcome back to another episode of Who's to Say. I'm your host, Tom Foolery. Thrilled to be back here with you. We've had several days of sunshine, and as I have come to realize, talking about the weather is no longer small talk because it's such a dynamic, unpredictable, interesting aspect of our daily lives. Because, as many have observed, and I mean observed literally and documenting the evolution of whether it's taken on an entirely different nature, uh, which is unnatural, and that's sort of a I know that's sort of a paradox, but it's true. But we're not going to talk too much about that quite yet, although I do have some material for you on that respect. The title of this episode is "What's the best that could happen?" and it's one of those pivot questions using the immense and innate power of our language to construct shifts in what we're looking for. I haven't done a long podcast on this yet, but the research and reading I've done into the optical power of our sensory organs, being the eyes, has led me to accept the belief that so much of vision is projection. It's not simply the receiving and therefore decoding of information, it's also projecting and encoding information. And it still leaves the onus on us to explore and realize and descale the lenses of our eyes so that we can see these things. But it's so magical to embrace that perspective. And I remember speaking about this recently in terms of the terrain paradigm versus germ theory. And simply put, and setting aside evidence and compelling scientific displays of why one is preferred to the other, I simply choose the more beautiful and brilliant belief system of terrain that says my body is inexplicably wise beyond all calculation, and that it is constantly seeking to balance me, to heal me, and that it really does not require too much external intervention. And the presence of this balancing force in harmony with what my body is trying to achieve is just more appealing to me than pathogens and germs and the transfer of undesirables. And so it's not too dissimilar to what we choose to see. Are you looking for beauty, or are you looking for despair? Are you looking for freedom and safety, or are you looking for danger and reasons to be scarce and anxious? And a lot of that can come down to subconscious activity. Unconscious activity is probably more like it, because subconscious, I also ascribe to the system that says that the subconscious is really our body, our autonomous or autonomic functions, rather, that we don't really have to think about, but you take into account books like The Body Keeps the Score and these really impactful concepts that our body, because it retains so much, because it also is a system of systems involved with constantly interacting with so much information, then I think there's a lot of momentum behind that conception that it's really our subconscious. But our unconscious is something different entirely. And one of the texts that I want to refer to here today, I mentioned on the last podcast, The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. It's such a unique and also very fluid mindfulness spiritual practice, because it blends. It's not even a blend. I mean, it is a representation of, I think, what Rudolf Steiner is best known for, which is spiritual science. And that's probably the best description I can give of the Gene Keys at this moment. But it is, if I can refer to the definition of a gene key from the Gene Keys website, you can go to genekeys.com. I'll link to that here right now, actually, so that we can see that for those of you who want to follow along. Test my savvy here on the webcam. actually make this I was going to make this a scroll. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So those of you watching, which I always implore you to do, check out genekeys.com, because this is one of the resources I go to make the book much more of an education and more of a practice. And the site and the basics course on gene keys says a gene key is an evolutionary code hardwired into your DNA. Like the different notes of a musical score, your gene keys lay out the symphony that is your life. There are 64 gene keys in total, mirroring the 64 codons of our DNA. And each key has one of 6 nuances called lines. I won't get into the lines quite yet, but it continues. Your Gene Keys profile, which is available to you free online when you go to genekeys.com, you'll see at the top there is a free profile tab, and I implore you to do that. And it will hopefully pique your interest and you'll want to go buy the book or just explore the resources available online. All of it is right at your fingertips. This profile shows you which of the 64 gene keys and corresponding lines relate to certain areas of your life. In addition to this, each gene key operates across a spectrum known as the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word for transcendent essence. You will see all these words for your gene keys when you create your profile in that section. The story and events of your life unfold according to what kind of music you get out of your gene keys. Do you learn from your mistakes and refine your gifts, playing at higher and higher frequencies? Or do you get dragged down by your shadows, becoming a victim of the many difficult dramas you keep creating? And a couple reflections from that last paragraph there. The story and events of your life unfold according to what kind of music you get out of your gene keys. That is a parallel of a concept I've often spoken about on this podcast, which is the elicitation, the pulling out of our intelligence and I'll qualify that actually to say our wisdom, because Richard Rudd talks about this very eloquently, that wisdom is heart-based and intelligence is brain-based, and there's nothing wrong with brain-based intelligence. It's a necessity to function at a high level in this realm. However, it would certainly serve us in our hero's journey and our personal dramas to find ways to tap into and unfold the wisdom of our hearts. That's really the only place that it can reside. And so I still feel this way with genuine education and the knowledge that we use to go through this life. Most of it is finding the things that draw it out of us and not what we can cram into our brains with information. I mean, we're seeing now, and I fall prey to this all the time, information overwhelm. And it's a really dicey dance sometimes to engage with as much information as out there. I mean, I listen to several podcasts with varying frequencies. Some of them, like Robert Phoenix, Astro Weather, and what he does on the 11th House on YouTube. That's an almost daily program, and the longer ones are 2 hours if they're Friday or Sunday nights or something special like that. But the rest are 30 to 60 minutes for daily astrology. If I check out a Joe Rogan episode, which I do less frequently these days, those are several hours. But all this is to say, it's a lot. And we don't always afford ourselves the time to really chew on and digest the information that we get, especially through long form media like podcasts. And then to continue that digestion metaphor, see what comes out the other end. I mean, see what we are able to assimilate and use and then make room for without getting too graphic in that example there. And the gene keys are an invaluable tool for that, I found. And I wanted to read, this came up in the early stages of this podcast because of the shadow discussion and subconscious versus unconscious. And though the shadow is often referred to as unconscious, or I've mentioned it as Wetiko, the mind virus that lurks in our shadow and is often shrouded in whatever the currency of the time is, if it's logic and reason, if it's scientism, if it's religion. I mean, it can wear so many different disguises, and it's really hard to isolate. But similar to a very holistic or homeopathic healing model, you need a dose of it in order to develop some sort of strengthening response to it, as well as treating root causes and not just symptoms. And so the gene keys has become this really universal tool in my toolkit lately. Of course, I'm looking specifically at my profile, and this is a particular snapshot from one of them, from one element of my profile. But it's also, I encourage you to use it as that random resource to, if you want to just start with it and get it, as I beseech you to do, just open it to a random page and see what sort of new insight is available to you there. And I firmly believe that there will be many. But to dive into this, the 17th gene key, which for me, just so you know a little bit more about me, is related to my emotional quotient, my emotional intelligence specifically. And there's interestingly enough, I forgot to mention this, even though, it wasn't front of mind. I'm just realizing this now, but opened up talking about the eye and our optical reception and projection. That's an association with the gene key, and the 17th shadow. And so, as I mentioned in that description of the gene keys, there's 3 levels. And forgive me if this stays pretty surface level, precursory for now. It's worth, again, going to genekeys.com, getting into the free resources so you can have a real potent taste of what's available to you through this practice. But 3 levels, and in the best cases, as we said, what's the best that could happen? The best that can happen is you ascend to each of these different levels from our shadow, which is where we inhabit pretty seamlessly. And we're going to see why in a minute from this particular gene key example. And then there's the gift, which is embracing those natural phenomena within us that is encoded and latent within us. And then the siddhi, which is that highest transcendent essence. And it may seem lofty, but again, with a practice, with that discipline of a practice, we can get there. And that is the best that can happen. For the 17th gene key, the shadow is opinion. And the first subtitle to that is the closing of the third eye, because the 17th gene key is associated with the pituitary gland. And in reading this, I was just so struck by, I had actually read the 18th gene key, for which the shadow is judgment, and they're tethered very closely together, and that's a theme you'll see throughout how this book is structured. And there's so many nuances and layers to the consumption of this material, but I'll siphon off some of this so we can dig into it together in a context of this discussion, to see beyond what is, again, what we take for granted as just so base nature for us, almost second nature, I guess you could say. But there's a great breakup in here, especially for the shadow aspects of these gene keys, of a suppressed nature, or excuse me, a repressive nature, something that is suppressed and repressed within us, or a reactive nature. And so the reactive nature I'll be reading here for the opinion-centric aspect, a shadow aspect of the 17th gene key, is being even more opinionated. And I'm reading here: opinion can be understood as anything that requires defense to uphold. As the 17th shadow turns outward, it creates the impressive systems of dogma seen all across the world. This shadow has great appeal to the male population in particular, since the male brain naturally favors the rational approach. These people use logic as a means to enforce their opinions and views in the world, thereby making others essentially wrong. The majority of the world is made up of those who create the opinion bases. science, systems, and hierarchies, and those who then believe those opinions and unwittingly become their victims. Those who defend an opinion are ruled by their unconscious anger, which is the expression of their deeper fear. It is extremely rare to find a human being who is truly free from opinion. Such a person must have looked into their fears and embraced their rage in order to move into that magical place that sees both sides of life. Only in seeing both sides can balance be struck and control yielded. That's a small snapshot of what you can glean from the Gene Keys, and we're going to return to that in a moment. But another commentary that takes place in that section is about the separation and distinction, and that is perpetually present in an opinion-based system. And as I've tried to shed light on this podcast, when we criticize science and scientism, as we so often do, so much of that is opinion-based and consensus-based. I mean, you can find this with a fairly simple search. It's even in the legacy media commentary for sure, that consensus is a preference approach in the world of science these days. Experts agree. Classic trope, so painful to hear. All you have to do is, just like we did in the last couple of years, say which experts, and then you'll definitely find some who have been silenced and repressed, and it's just another symptom of a beast system, of a diseased system. But the defense mechanism is what's especially interesting to me, and that is broken down, as was mentioned there, when you leave yourself open to seeing all sides. And as I was preparing for this podcast, I was thinking about, of course, how I can be better about this, but I have an upcoming podcast as well on my mind and on my heart about choosing sides. And it's because I was inspired by a conversation between two very heart-centered men who were typifying that for other men out there. So it was very specific to me and my interest. And their focal point in one phase of this podcast was about just that. I mean, to be a man does entail taking sides. You don't want to be wishy-washy. You don't want to stay neutral, because at some point you do have to take a side. And hopefully it's your side. I mean, if you just become this porous portal for people to walk through and all over when it comes to you and what you want and what you demand, and what, to say nothing of what you need, then, I mean, you certainly lose your sense of self in the world. And these are the multifaceted levels. I mean, so many people talk about losing self, and that's part of this journey as well. It's the it's the real challenge of the great work, as you go through these phases of individuation and focusing on self and befriending your ego. I once again emphatically disagree, and I did when I was reading the book and all his sourcing from Stoicism, which, as I've said, is a valuable aspect of my philosophical journey. But ego is not the enemy. You need to befriend it in order to just make sure it has its place in the world, to have a sense of self, and therefore have a no that is as powerful or more powerful than your yes, so that you take a side. No, I won't fucking do that. No, that's not okay. Because if you say, yes, I'll do that, and yes, it's all okay, if you say that to everything, then we get the world that we have now, when men of varying levels of strength and identity have let too much corruption and oppression and injustice go on for whatever reason. And we're all confronting that now. We have to do it on an interior level first, again, because that's where this great work starts. Richard Rudd isn't saying that you need to take your opinion right out into the world and create this. I mean, that's one place to be, but most of it starts within. And I mean, there's so much I can say about this opinionation factor. But the defense mechanism is certainly one that I've tried to work on. I can promise you, if you're someone who struggles with this, it's way more fun in a cosmic and a self-growth way, to be more fluid with your, you can call them beliefs or you can call them opinions. Both can be fairly rigid and induce us to resistance to anything that threatens that. But what we're really talking about here is not identifying yourself with whatever opinion you have. And I bring this example up all the time. When I was first getting into personal training in the gym, I thought most everybody should be doing things with a barbell. I hardly use a barbell myself now, and I'm a regularly participating athlete. It's it's a modality available to me. I do have a proficiency there, but that was just the folly of a one size fits all mentality because it was something I was so passionate about at the time. And I was and can be very harsh on myself when I do that to people, when I am so hard line with certain things and speak with such sometimes misplaced confidence. And because I get a lot of the source for that, and maybe y'all can feel me on this too, that gosh, it can be really frustrating when someone asks you something and you say, well, it depends. And I know I always want to give this wide lens perspective of context and the what ifs and it depends, and some people don't want to hear that. Some people don't have the attention span for it. I want to give people the benefit of my faith, not the benefit of my doubt, the benefit of my faith that you do. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you have the appetite for a wider array of detail, nuance, and context. And I certainly want to bring that to more people through this medium. But when we identify with our opinions and our beliefs, then of course that's a great threat. And the ego always falls back on judgment to protect itself. And so that's, if there's a distinction that we can make, let opinions be the things of this world, and ego can be something, of course, much more personal and unique to us, and we can have an interface with the things that come and go through the porous nature of our ego. And someone brings you a better insight or a better way of doing things, don't beat yourself up about it. Easier said than done. I know. I'm totally there, and I still have to combat that regularly. But when I have stark reminders from something as deep and real and true as the gene keys, then I listen. One other transition piece I wanted to bring from this next section of the gene keys to help steward us on our way is the very next section gets into the gift of the 17th gene key, which is farsightedness. So that can be summarized, if it's not already here, excuse me, in, as I mentioned, that wider lens that sees both sides, all sides, 360 degrees, to encapsulate that, okay, I probably don't have the only angle to be looking at this. And unless it becomes a 360 degree angle, so I can really take it all in. But I'm reading here, it is ironic that what often passes for reason in the world is really someone's opinion dressed up in facts that happen to justify it. At the shadow frequency, the human mind distorts logic and facts for its own ends by building one argument and then concealing its counter-argument. The mass of humanity is easily influenced by one side or the other. It is out of the mind's duality that all human drama is born, and the mass consciousness of humanity loves drama. It is all a game played by spin doctors, and if you think you have escaped this game, then look deeply at your opinions and perhaps you will discover how easily conditioned your mind really is. And that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because at other points in this section, there's mention to an experience that was so far out of our hands, which was the first 7-year cycle of our lives from birth to the age of 7. And even into the second cycle from 7 to 14, so much conditioning takes place. Again, there's so much more reception out of necessity for our growth to take place. And we know when we look within, how many tall and daunting fence posts had to be driven in by our parents, by our teachers, by our coaches, by our community to signify to us we don't do that, we don't say that, we don't believe that, we don't behave that way. And of course, what's not being said there is because that's not good. We only do what's good and right. And of course, we all have to unpack those experiences for ourselves and untangle ourselves from those webs. But I think the universal sentiment that was mentioned there is how much we all can enjoy the drama. And dramas really only take place when there's opposing characters on the stage. And so therefore we have the left-right systems, the dipolar or binary systems, good, bad, my team, your team, left, right, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, black, white. I mean, straight, not. You can expand that to so many different cultural dramas, which is why I try not to get into those. And I mean, there might be some sides I take, which I'll speak about at a later date. But I'm looking more for the conflicts that apply to all of us. But the point being, before we continue on here, is that one of the core factors of opinion is, and this is rooted again in defensiveness, which is rooted in anxiety, which is rooted in fear, is distancing ourselves from what we believe to be bad or antithesis to our existence. And that doesn't leave us open, does it, to a more kind and peaceful worldview when, especially if we haven't done too much work to visit the conditioning that we have. The approach I take, and I echo here, is instead of saying that's not true, we ask, is that true? Does that apply to me now? Was that once true for me? Which I gave that example of personal training. It was once true for me, these approaches I took and these beliefs that I had. I try to do better. And there's a gentleness that I ask all of us to engage with, that because I think there's a twofold issue here, is, and so much of this was at stake with people's stances relating to COVID and the shots and the measures, and there were different tiers to that too. I don't mean to make it more complex than necessary, but some people were against vaccine mandates and that coercion and that enforcement measure, but believed in the medical intervention of the shots. Some people believe that COVID is real, but it's a cold or a flu, no worse. So there's levels to all that. What I'm really getting at here is what the cost is, what the perceived cost is to changing a stance on that. For the public people, it's different for you and I. I'm not a public figure, not really going that route, but, and I don't think any of you are, but hey, if there's any public people out there, I hope you'll take this to heart in a supportive way. For public people in the Twitter sphere, in the social media arena, I get how daunting it can seem to say, I've changed my mind, I've changed my heart, I've changed my opinion on this. So there's the public cost to that. Even though we all talk about how much we should admire and respect people who admit when they're wrong, and we just don't have leaders who do that anymore. I can't remember the last time anyone really conceded that in anything meaningful at all. But the other potential perceived cost is the intense self-criticism. You idiot, how could you ever have believed that? What were you thinking? Look at all the foolish decisions you made in in spite of that or because of that. Again, I'm speaking from personal experiences. Those things can be really hard to deal with, but deal with them we must, because in that are the opportunities to grow in quantum leaps, because then you expose root causes. Then you keep asking why. Corey Sandhagen, who's a immensely talented and violent fighter, not violent in a grotesque way. I mean, he has the capacity for violence and displays it in the UFC. But I also enjoy his philosophy and his how well read he is. And I was watching him the other day offer to especially fighters this sequence for especially pre-fight anxiety. And he used the example of attacking the question of why, what am I afraid of as a prima facie, as a starting point. What am I afraid of? And if it's getting knocked out or losing in really quote unquote embarrassing fashion, you keep asking why. Why am I afraid to get knocked out that way? Well, because it's embarrassing. Why is it embarrassing? Well, I put in all this work and I was really confident. I told my friends and family and the media that I was going to win. Well, why is that so bad? Well, it's an ego hit. And you keep going and going. You keep digging and digging. And that's a spiritual practice in and of itself. If you are courageous enough to really dig your nails into those questions of the source of your fears and anxieties. And to stay on theme here, as I'm want to do, sink my teeth and claws and nails back into the question of the reorientation of what's the best that could happen. Too often, too easily, we say what's the worst that could happen. And that's a mentality that is searching for, and I'll qualify this by saying, of course, I understand the anticipatory practice of this to prepare for worst case scenario. And what's the saying? It's plan for the worst, hope for the best. We can fix that. We can adjust that. We can plan for the best too. Because yeah, what happened if things went exactly how you wanted? To me, what that is priming us to do is have this intention that is deeply founded in, you can call it manifestation, you can call it optimism, positive thinking, whatever. But the fact is, on a universal level, there will be a response. For every one step we take toward our dream, the universe takes one step toward us. And when you say, what's the best that could happen with my plans, with my designs, then I think that's really putting you in an ideal position to walk that same path with the universe and not have to zigzag and not have to take steps back. But instead, you're saying, I'm looking for synchronicity, I'm looking for prosperity, abundance, I'm looking for alignment. And that's a lot more effective momentum than what's the worst that can happen. And ensconcing yourself in that anxious place. I mean, just think about it, if you will. When you're saying what's the worst that can happen, that's your expectation. I'm looking out for being reactive to something that is offensive to me. Of course, that robs us of the ability to say something that we interpret as a challenge or an obstacle. That robs us of the ability to say, what's the lesson here? If I am being taught something, if I'm being visited by the pain teacher, what's the lesson? If I only see this as bad break, bad luck, bad happenstance. Of course, another imperative line from the drama conversation of being opinionated. If you think you have escaped this game, it was something that. Oh no, it was from the definition of the Gene Keys. That's right. Excuse me a second. Or do you get dragged down by your shadows, becoming a victim of the difficult dramas you keep creating? It's one of the fucking most. It is without a doubt one of the hardest concepts to grasp beyond an intellectual level. And I'm a total novice here. The more I talk about it, hopefully the deeper I get. But that supreme ownership of saying to yourself, I've created this, and still maintaining the gentleness and the grace to say, I created this drama, I created this fuck up, I created this scarcity. I'm the source of it. Of course, that's a deep spiritual truth as well, as recognizing source consciousness as ourselves. Of course, we're a piece of that. We're a descendant of that. But man, is it painful to sit with that prospect of whatever this unfortunate visit from the pain teacher is. I invited her here. She is my guest, and she's not leaving until I learn this lesson. It is supremely difficult, and that doesn't mean we avoid it. The more we avoid the shadow, the shadow at different points when you're out walking. Of course, where shadow most intense is outdoors. You might get some shadows inside, but with that kind of lighting, it's really not the same. But from a sunlight shadow, from a moonlight shadow, it could be in any association to you. We think of shadow so often as being behind us and out of sight, but it's still there. But what if you're walking with the light behind you and you see it right there before you, and you keep walking and it's long and it's dark, of course. What's the symbolism there? It's still part of you. Light is something that reveals it to you. So there's a counterforce to that. But your image, your embodiment is creating that. If you weren't there, I'm sure this is a Zen koan or some sort of brain twister, but if you weren't there, would there be a shadow? The tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it and all that. But we are the creative force of everything. And there is untold wisdom in that realization and engaging with that source material to say, okay, I created this drama from my over-opinionation, from my ego games, from my ignorance, from my unconsciousness, whatever we can ascribe it to, as our own doctors, as our own coaches, as our own spiritual adults, instead of punishing or diagnosing based on a symptom model, we have a responsibility, the ability to respond to that quandary and say, where did this come from? What's the source? What's my root to this? And am I going to believe myself into a new behavior or behave myself into a new belief? And that's a protocol I've really been toying with, which is why it comes up here, and you can read into that for yourself. But if I want to test a new response to this issue I'm having, am I someone who does better with honing in on a belief that will then guide my behavior, or do I need to get into the behavior first and trust that the belief will come along? So you can take a change in your, let's say meditation, I guess. You might believe, because of all these podcasts about it and all of this quote unquote research done about it, you might believe that it's good for you, so that's going to guide your behavior. Or you might be on the other side of that coin and just be someone who says, I'm just going to fucking do it. I'm just going to sit here for 10 minutes and be as quiet as I possibly can, and belief be damned, I'm just going to see what it does for that. But I'm going to start with just leaning into the fuck it, I'm going to do it mentality. It's the same with working out. Some people will just say, fuck it, I'm going to do it. I don't need to have a belief that it's going to transform me, that it's good for my testosterone, that it's good for my longevity. Some people are on the opposite side. But something for you to toy with and see what kind of person. And I know we're talking a lot about some fairly personal and philosophical ideals here. So we're gonna switch lanes into, of course, one of my favorite activities, to bring you all the marvelous work of David Avocado Wolfe and his inimitable memes. This is such a gem. It's two car crash dummies in a very intimate, uh, near kissing embrace, and the caption is, "When you both know it'll end in disaster, but you don't care." And gosh, if that isn't so much of, I mean, I could get into a metaphysical explanation of this with the two yous. I mean, the you that knows what you need, and the you that doesn't care and wants to, binge drink, or eat the crap food, or say the mean thing. Uh, this is, I mean, but obviously it applies to our relationships as well. But I just love stuff like that. I mean, the reason why I choose these memes is because I think they work on a few levels. That they're, and that's what makes them so rich when they do make you smile. It's hopefully because it's hitting you on more than one level, not just the obvious hilarity of seeing a couple of car crash dummies kiss, even though that's almost what we're looking at here. I have started a Telegram channel, so we're using David Avocado Wolfe's Telegram here. But you all can follow mine right now. It's Home Court Health, which is a branding idea that I've been cultivating for some time now, and I'm considering a sweeping shift to that brand. Who's to say would go to that? But we'll talk about that another day. But it's for stuff like this, that this becomes so easily shared, and you can get my thoughts in writing, and certainly connect with people. I mean, the David Avocado Wolfe channel has 110,000 subscribers. There's no commenting. There are other great channels, Shervin of Symbiotica, Luke's Story, the Alpha Vedic community, the Way Forward community, all people whose stuff I share on my own channel. And there's more of a community aspect there. There's more commenting and sharing of resources, and you can direct message people in the group. So you've got options. I think that's fun. It's all encrypted. It's all very private. It's, as long as you're an admitted member of the group. So that's my pitch for Telegram, because I think it's just a boon of an option. This is where we get into a little bit more. I'm gonna give you something of a preview of where we start to go with the next episode. To think about the civilization that we're all inhabiting, and what sort of warfare that we are all potentially participants in, victims, soldiers, innocent bystanders, what have you. This was a really thought-provoking consideration, and I had been vaguely familiar with this before because of my interest in Russian history, which I would say in the culture for now has been, because it's somewhat historical, it's been one of the poster children for communism and what's wrong with it. But there's also epic literature on it, from Solzhenitsyn to historical coverage as well. But this was quite an interesting take. This person asking, why were the elderly so heavily targeted with the COVID/pharma murdering scheme? Intense language there. Easiest to kill off to inflate the fear-mongering, yes. However, one of the first things communists do when taking over a country is kill off the old people who remember and represent the past. They don't just want to take over America, they want to erase our history. And unfortunately, I think we've definitely seen a lot of that. I mean, this is the digital age where you wipe something off the internet. In some people's minds, it doesn't exist. Hard copies are anachronism. They're a thing of the past, and they don't really stand up to what you could get with a up to the second data point from the interweb. And there's almost nothing more essential and profound than a living and breathing representation of our history and our past. And there are a few golden nuggets out there more valuable than back in my day. I would kill to hear from my grandparents what their perspective is telling them compared to growing up in the earliest parts of the 20th century until now. So a couple of my grandparents would be about 100 years old, maybe more. I think that's, if I'm being generous to the biohacking and longevity community, maybe we do need more people striving for the centenarian Olympics, to tell people, okay, back in my day, or what I learned from my grandparents, because it's a link. You want those links to the past. And I'm alarmed on a daily basis how much of our, let's say, collective historical identity, not just nationalism, not just being an American, but as a humanity, as men and women, on a near daily basis, that's continuing to be erased and eroded. And there was a sweeping antagonistic measure that this person is elucidating to, and I mean, this also goes into the disrespect and the shuffling off of the elderly community, out of sight, out of mind, into, we have the proliferation of senior living, and of course it disconnects us. I could get into, and I won't for now, but just the layers to the fear that's now associated with being old is, fuck, what if that's me? What if my kids abandon me into an old home? And for some people, that's too much for them to bear, and that doesn't lead them to. I'm speculating, of course. I'm 29 years old. What the fuck do I know about being old? But I would imagine that that's led some people to a state of perpetual weakness and anxiety. And there are a few things people fear more right now than getting old. And it's not just because of the prospects of abandonment, but I think it's part of it. But there's, without a doubt in my mind, a very sinister agenda to eradicate our connections to the past through books, through commentary, and certainly through a generation that is not respective. I think I've shared the meme before, but it was a Twitter question that someone posted about name one thing that just something that like that blows your mind that people don't really think about. And someone wrote that people discriminate against the elderly for jobs or for places in society, and yet it's almost exclusively 70 and 80-year-olds running the country right now. I mean, gosh, the president's almost 80. The Speaker of the House was Nancy Pelosi for fucking forever, and she's got to be 80. And Mitch McConnell, all these ridiculous parasites who are way too old to be quote unquote leaders. It's really mind boggling. So prop those people up, but they're not connected to they're certainly not connected to any growth or perspectives that would be future oriented. They want to preserve status quo, line their pockets. I mean, it's such an Ahrimanic ideology to make the very most of this material reality. Only this time exists. Why would we do things for future generations? I mean, yeah, it's there's a lot to be said there. But I want to share some more great gems with you guys. I, for some reason, have this indelibly lodged in my mind, which, if you've seen the movie Holes, it was a great book that I read in my childhood, but there's this scene where the camp leader, I think she's the warden, she's the reason why she makes all these ne'er-do-wells dig holes looking for this treasure. And it's a flashback to her, her grandpa who was the one who was initially trying to steal the treasure. He's now an old man, and he's making her dig, and she says, "I'm tired of digging, Grandpa." And he says, "That's too damn bad." In this great image, which you can, I know I'm butchering the scene, please forgive me, fans and fanatics of the Holes movie. In this particular meme, the little girl saying "I'm tired, Grandpa," is U.S. companies, and the grandpa is BlackRock, and it's her saying, "I'm tired of going woke and going broke, Grandpa." And BlackRock says, "That's too damn bad." Because this speaks to, if you don't already know, hopefully this lands with you, but you might have to do a little bit more homework. But the Uber Corporation, which is BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity, Citigroup. I mean, it's really, I can count on one hand, this hand, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 ultra corporations that they own the stock market. They have the greatest influence over culture, obviously on down through this particular example of U.S. corporations. But go woke, go broke is a very real phenomenon, that when these corporations start to align themselves really intensely with whatever the cultural uh, heat wave is of the moment, then they get really big backlash. So this has happened recently with ESPN and Disney, them having to lay off so many people. Happened with the Anheuser-Busch line with Bud Light promoting a transgender person as a spokesperson for the brand, which just baffles me. I mean, when you think about who drinks Bud Light, that was a miss from their marketing department. But it's a really interesting trend that it does not pay to jump on the fucking bandwagon of whatever the culture tells you is must be kowtowed to at the moment. I didn't even go to business school, and I can tell you people that you're gonna see me scan through. I'll take this off for the moment, but as I said, you can go to my Telegram, Home Court Health, which I'm going to link to. But David Avocado Wolfe's is a great place to start. This is another. I do hate to continue to beat this drum because it is a painful one. But if you're at all curious about this is going to be another revisionist history. I've already seen it start. The misdirection, and then it'll turn into scapegoating, and it'll turn to, oh, now we know. Oh gosh, that's my favorite fucking phrase. Now we know, because some metadata study revealed it to you all of a sudden. But this rundown of some really alarming all-cause mortality and morbidity issues is quite a good encapsulation of the moment we're in with worldwide sick care. And it says, died suddenly equals doctors baffled. Sudden cancer equals doctors baffled. Sudden strokes equals doctors baffled. Heart attacks, doctors baffled. Myocarditis, doctors baffled. Blood clots, doctors baffled. Guillain-Barré syndrome, doctors baffled. Neurological problems, doctors baffled. Compromised immune systems, doctors baffled. Young, fit, and healthy died suddenly, doctors baffled. Fertility problems, doctors baffled. Dead babies, doctors baffled. Bell's palsy, doctors baffled. Me, I'm not baffled. It's very much how I feel, because early on I was tuned into the people who were making the predictions based on what we knew at the time as the ingredients and the mechanisms of delivery and the interaction with the immune system of the COVID interventions, that these things were almost guaranteed to happen. And of course, at the bottom of this that rundown is a picture of a syringe with what looks like a really intense sort of spatial matrix inside. And I always encourage people, I'm going to add it here in the link so you can visit it as a reminder, to check out what I think is this is a must-have educational experience. The End of COVID.com, run by Alex Zek, among others, because it does a really unparalleled and professional job of breaking down the many heads of the hydra that was the COVID moment, economically, politically, culturally, scientifically, and then when they get into the really deep and dark corners of the recent history of mRNA interventions, really using those as something of a weapon against the collective immunity, consciousness, and energy terrain for humanity. I mean, that's all been grossly disrupted now, and then it has resulted in, unfortunately, because of the significant uptake and toxicity from the first couple rounds of the shots. And I mean, it was so well predicted early on that this was going to turn into perennial, regular booster shots. And of course, originally it was sold as you only need one, you only need two. And what do we have now? They roll one out every fucking couple of months, which is just insanity. So stay away from it. You don't need it. That's all I really have to say for now. And if you don't trust me, that's fine. But it's incumbent upon you to do a little bit more homework than just whatever the box is telling you, because that's only one story. And this is another story that's being told right now. If you are able to keep up with the maelstrom of distraction and deception and it's like I said, it's overwhelming with the information. But this great meme says, I don't know if I'm being distracted by vaccine deaths, so I don't notice inflation, or if inflation is a distraction from Ukraine money laundering, or if Ukraine is a distraction for rampant pedophilia, or if pedophilia is a distraction from election fraud. And you can add 18 other fucking things to that, but whether or not you take any of those things seriously, I think the takeaway is that there's plenty of distractions that I have decreed long ago. And the end of COVID talks about a lot of these. Maybe not Ukraine and pedophilia or election fraud so much, but they're offshoots of a common web that you and I are not privy to. We're often on the back foot of when and how these things happen. And but I made a decree several years ago that I was not going to be whiplashed into having my attention changed every news cycle. You know, whatever's in and whatever's out. When I find something that I'm interested in, if it's current or not, I mean, I love history, so and I seek out things that I have a pretty good understanding would have a bearing on my present conception of this realm and this world. Then I go headlong into that, and I can shut out the current moment for a while. But you got to keep your wits about you. And if you do find something genuinely interesting about the current whatever cycle we're in for your attention, you have the great gift of the interweb to if you don't check out Substack, please look into Substack, because you can get this stunning array of different perspectives, and it's another open source. I mean, it's another, all you need is two brain cells holding hands and the ability to type, and you can have yourself a popular Substack. And thankfully there are people with more than just two brain cells holding hands. They've got a whole army of them, and they use them to great effect to apply their journalistic integrity and acumen in order to bring people something that is only they are beholden to the integrity for that. They don't have to worry about editors and corporations and board of directors and investors and all that shit. I mean, it's a real, that's another freedom outlet is substack.com. So do turn into that, because it will only be to your benefit, especially that there are so many people who comment on what goes on now. You know, if that's war, if it's economics, if it's health, I mean, you've really got your pick of the litter there. Now I'm gonna really open the floodgates, and this is, I don't even think it's that controversial. This is just calling out the change in eras, and it's 125 years ago is the timeline here, which does not seem like that long ago. But for our benefit, and again, we don't have that many people who have any connection to this. I mean, we do, but do we listen to them? Do we help it transcend to our moment and beyond what we think is really the best direction for our society? Paul talks about, he poses the question, if I did this, would it benefit the world? Would it benefit my community? And these are some, you may think these are insignificant examples, but this picture points out that 125 years ago, you did not have to ask permission from the government to do the following: collect rainwater, go fishing, own a property, start a business, renovate your home, build a home, use a transportation vehicle, get married, hunt, own a weapon, cut hair, sell a product, protest, grow food on your property, set up a lemonade stand, sell food. You can do virtually nothing now without being extorted by government and obtaining their permission first. If you still think you're free, you're deluding yourself. You live in a tax farm as free-range humans. The only thing I would disagree with about that last sentiment is we're not even that free-range. I mean, you still need some sort of access to be able to go just about anywhere. But the theme is one I'm very passionate about, with some solutions I'll offer down the road. You can go to my website, thomasalenzo.com, under the coach section, and you can see that I have something, this banner that starts with I am man. And it's for this law course. And law is something different than the legal system. I'll leave it at that for now. But it's not a completely new, it's a timeless investigation into true law, which has nothing to do with statutes and, again, things like this. The whole experience of thinking that we have to ask for permission to do something like collect rainwater or get married. When only two people, when it's the union that validates and gives meaning to a marriage, why would the state be the final arbiter of the validity of that union? I can let you sit with that. One other thing that I've had to put on people's minds during a recent unfortunate distant connection to a custody battle. Why, in the end, is the state the final arbiter of who controls the life of that child? And in the end, if there's no agreeable compensation or compromise, a child becomes the ward of the state. Well, spoiler alert, it's because at the signing of the birth certificate, a child becomes the ward of the state. And there's so much interesting language and precedent in there to establish that, and you can look into that with some other resources I provide on my website, or even just do your own homework. And if you don't know where to start, you can always reach out to me. But it's liberating to dig into this stuff, because you unshackle yourself from this childlike mindset where you think you have to petition daddy government for permission to think about it. Getting married is a pretty offensive one, but as a realtor, I have a particular issue with everything around the home. There's a lot there, but especially the investment and the work you do on your own home. Why do you have to pay $200 or $100 for a permit? What permission? You want to do it. You're on the hook for the architect, the builders, the subcontractors. If they get, you can arrange agreements with them for liability and indemnification and liens and all that shit. It really is. There's an extortion mechanism here that government feels entitled to every piece of every pie that you make. And I certainly have a philosophical issue with that. I always welcome arguments. I want to keep my sword sharp to cut through all the bullshit. And hey, if I meet another strong sword, I always have to engage that battle. I got a couple more for you here before we peace out for the day, because I just want to go on the record and say this. This should be the thumbnail for this. Fuck the World Economic Forum. If you do not follow the work of I don't know if you call it work. They seem to be playing, and they're trying to play with all of us, of the World Economic Forum. I'll do a longer exposition on some of their agendas, but for now, you do need to get into the details of what they're doing, because they are professional surface level cheerleaders for their own team. So the World Economic Forum and its a lot of its precursors, United Nations, Council on Foreign Relations, entities like that, they are the farming system for the buzzwords that we all now enjoy: diversity, sustainability, collective oriented. Those are always signs to me that we're being hoodwinked and we're being deceived, because they have definitions. For instance, you can look up 15-minute cities if you're not familiar with those already, and the World Economic Forum is certainly a big advocate for those. One of the really strange, and this is in concert with the United Nations, one of the really, I find it strange, initiatives that they are promoting is, let me see if I have what it's called. I was just revisiting this the other day. The Wildlands Project. The Wildlands Project is this really fairly dystopian agenda where they're promising that they're going to be committed to rewilding so much of various continents, but hidden in those promotions is the idea that they're going to herd people into exclusively urban settings, that in order to protect the environment, to save it from climate change, we need all people to move into cities and be huddled together, just so you reduce your carbon footprint. So you're not going that far. You just work down the street, and you just go to the grocery store, right down the street, and everything happens right here, and we're just going to let everything else be rewilded. And this is part and parcel to an initiative that's going on here in the States, where they're trying to make the conservation lands and national parks that have been, again, oddly under government control, because public is really not public. They don't let you and I be stewards of it. It's government controlled, but they're trying to offer conservation and wildlife areas for sale to capital investment. And when BlackRock and State Street own your local national park, and then it's private, and they say, no, you can't spend time here, you can't live here, you can't live within X radius of here because we have property rights. I mean, that's a really creepy game. But just suffice it to say, from now till the end, till its dissolution, fuck the World Economic Forum. There's not a thing that I trust them to do for anyone's benefit, other than their own, of course, because that's the name of the game. I can't rant and riff too long on this one, but I posted this to my Instagram the other day, and it was fake checked, which is my description for fact checking. And it says the people who are $30 trillion in debt are giving you a credit score. And I think the fact check was from USA Today, and it's not unique to my post. It just means that this post was making waves, and so they had to combat the message. But I think again, that's why you have to read this shit. I mean, you can't just take a little banner at face value, because all it says, I think, was the government does not give out credit scores. And my retort to that, which I also posted on my Instagram, was either they're acknowledging that the financial system exists outside of any sort of governmental, legislative, legal limitation, or they're ignorant to the fact that the government is what quote unquote regulates, which is really endorses and supports and sleeps with the financial industry. And I mean, when you read books like The Creature from Jekyll Island, and you get into the history of the Federal Reserve and the history of money in this country, and the fact that we are just a debt-based society, and the phoniness of consumer credit. I mean, there's corporate credit is still fairly phony, but at least it has something of a, I'm probably being way too generous here, but it has something more of a legitimate economic impact. The personal credit scores, that's another creepy game that is really keeping people in that slavery, that's keeping people beholden to these grotesquely arbitrary markers that indicate your success or your access to resources in the society. And it really is dictated by people who have no concept of value, of fiscal responsibility. They also have no concept of the Federal Reserve, of the bottomless pit of money that is the Federal Reserve, all in an effort to leave us beholden, always inflating, always paying up to the people who are the owners and controllers of this society, who benefit from. There are of course people who benefit from inflation and from supply issues, and they pull the strings. And so this is just a great. I really enjoyed that meme. Whoever did it gets infinite credit. This is a fucking great one. I hope you guys circulate this. A couple computer programmers, one sitting there saying, "What do I do now?" And his associate says, "Just do what they taught you in college." And the thought bubble for the guy who said, "What do I do now?" goes to the LGBTQ plus flag, which is not a far cry from the truth, from what I am hearing. That there is a lot of that suffused into the college, to the university world right now, because that takeover happened a long time ago, and A liberal arts education is not what it used to be because it's way more liberal than art, and it really does not have much basis uh, in transferable skill sets, which is what we're driving at there with that meme. Gosh, there's so many here to choose from. I'll probably leave with just these last three. Um, this is very profound. I want to make sure that we get this in here. Attributed to Edmund Burke, a quote that says, "Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little." It's similar to another meme I have that says, "What can I do? I'm just one person." And then it said 7 billion people. And that is the defeatist and disconnected mentality that many of us are vulnerable to. What can I do? Even if it's just a little, even if it's just a little, you're doing something. And if you're oriented on a question of what would love do now, what would courage do now, if everybody did what I'm about to do, would it benefit all of us? Those are simple questions to ask that will take you, hopefully nudge you into action. And action doesn't always have to be grand and heroic. It could just be something you haven't done ever, or something you haven't done in a while. If it's a phone call, if it's an act of forgiveness or kindness, there's so many. There's a whole world of options available to you. This is another great one. It's a cat lying on a lawn next to a sign that says "No cats." First of all, who would dare have a "No cat" sign out in just a grassy area? But the sentiment here has become ungovernable. If there's no anything sign, you might want to you can say, I don't know if that really applies to me. This will have to be elaborated on at a later date, but this is planting a seed for now until we meet next time, and where I take some stances and some sides. If you resist only one thing, resist digital ID or kiss your freedom goodbye. The inertia going toward making everything digital, your ability to, I'd say one of the worst is the threats to have a digital identification that is your, again, permission to access the internet. That unless you have a facial recognition software on the internet, on your computer, on your device, you are not able to access the internet. There goes anonymity. There goes privacy. The last vestiges of privacy, at least. That's such almost an antiquated idea. But I know we're rapid fire, but this is. I'll leave you here to help bring us back to this idea of what's the best that can happen. Remember that you are not a machine. You are more like a garden. You need different things on different days. A little sun today, a little less water tomorrow. You have fallow and fruitful seasons. It is not a design flaw. It is wiser than perpetual sameness. What does your garden need today? What's the best that could happen if you took a day off? What's the best that could happen if you tried a new whole food? What's the best that could happen if you took time in prayer? What's the best that could happen if you took a risk on yourself? What's the best that could happen? Ellipsis. I think the best could happen. That's what I believe. The best that could happen is the best that can happen. And if you don't look for it, and if you don't know what it looks like, if you don't put yourself in a state of imagination, it's one of the most powerful lessons I've learned from studying Novak Djokovic is how committed he is to visualization. There's a not too well known tenet in the tennis world that because so many points end in 4 shots or less, if you just visualize your performance in 4 shots or less, you have a strategy. Of course, things change and you get whatever your opponent is capable of, but visualizing your performance could change your life. Visualizing what you would do when you confront someone, not in an antagonistic way, but when you confront a new situation, this is preparation. And again, I'm encouraging you to do it from the perspective of what's the best that could happen. And I hope the best does happen. I hope you have the best day ever when you hear this and beyond. I hope you in this winter season are taking time to rest and recuperate and gear up for a more active season, that you definitely need some sunshine. I don't think you're going to get scorched necessarily this time of year. So some sunshine, some water, some movement, some time with Dr. Quiet, some time doing the things that you enjoy, getting to know yourself, doing what's the very best for you. And I wish you all the very best, from the best in me to the best in you. And until next time, which is going to be a real barn burner when you get to listen to me for episode 60, start to really let you know how I feel and where I stand on these issues that are coming to the fore. Real change and healing only happens when we do it together. So I'm really looking forward to more chances to connect with you and make change with you. But from here on out, I hope you get to make the best changes for and with yourself. Take care until then.